Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Prince of Egypt from 1998. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this movie was selected by Jordan Bouchard. Dreamworks' Prince of Egypt was a major statement. It was a statement that Dreamworks could make an impressive, huge, high-budget animated movie. And not just one that Disney could make. This isn't one that Disney wouldn't make Prince of Egypt this way. It was an announcement that DreamWorks was here, they were different, and that they were going to do different kind of animated films. They would sort of never really make another one like this. So it was an announcement that, didn't really happen the way I think they thought it would. But at the time, it looked to really show like what DreamWorks could do with Jeffrey Katzenberg investing so much in animation. And his announcement and his beginnings of DreamWorks were far more ambitious than like what we got. But Prince of Egypt was to really show that. This was a project that he had wanted to do at Disney. Michael Eisner kept turning it down. When he started his own studio, this was one of the first projects he would do. Some would say maybe out of spite, which he, did do also with Ants, which then actually became the first DreamWorks film released because they wanted to get it out despite Disney. And then they also made Shrek despite Disney, and then he also made Madagascar. This is sort of a thing with Jeffrey Katzenberg. But this is really not just despite Disney. I think it's also showing how you could tell the story of the Ten Commandments or the story of Moses with animation, and it does it in an incredibly impressive way. It's a very dynamically visual film. It shows a lot of these sequences in ways that Cecil B. DeMille's film really could never even imagine to. Particularly, like, I think the parting of the Red Sea in Prince of Egypt, like when they're walking through the water, that's, I find, more impressive than the Cecil B. DeMille film, specifically the shot of the whale. I think that's an incredible shot. I actually got to see this on the huge screen at the Senator Theater, and I still remember the way it looked on that screen. It was absolutely gorgeous seeing that whale in the water. That's a spellbounding scene. Now, did Charlton Heston move his arms better than Val Kilmer's animated Moses? Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of when they're walking through the water, Prince of Egypt, the best one in terms of Ten Commandments I think I've ever seen. This was an announcement, and it was an animated film that didn't sell to kids, that was high budgeted, which was pretty unusual in 1998 and pretty ballsy actually, that Katzenberg thought he could get this to work, as well as like there wasn't the religious theatrical market at the time. That would happen like, I guess it's like 5-6 years later with Passion of the Christ, but at that time there was no like, oh, how do we sell block tickets or something like that. So this was really like a interesting, different idea from a new studio, which is pretty ballsy. I think it really pays off. It doesn't feel like any other kind of animated film. I mean, it doesn't, because they never even tried later, but it really has a sort of unique look on it of taking the story of Moses and Ramesses and even doing that in a different way. I mean, this film is basically the story of the Ten Commandments, if you know it. If you don't, I don't think I'm the one to explain it to you, but ask your parents, I guess. It takes a story that is known for its epicness, and I think when you think of the Cecil B. DeMille film, it's like more concerned on the epic nature of the entire story than how you were to tell the story. And in Prince of Egypt, they almost look at it in a much different way. The screenplay, which I think is written by Philip Lesempnik, I think. What I think they really do with this, what I thought was really smart, is it takes a story that is known for its epicness and draws it down to about Moses and Ramesses. And I even find that way a lot about these epic stories, that it's basically a pretty economical story if you were to really break it down, but they have to like include 70 characters and get into all these things. It's like the movie Gladiator. It's basically between Joaquin Phoenix and Russell Crowe, but I think there was like an hour that we probably could have cut, to be honest with you. And I think Prince of Egypt is sort of like that. What if we took one of these 3-hour movies that you sort of fall asleep during and was on 2 VHS tapes back in the day and all that stuff, and we just condensed it and made it animated? And Prince of Egypt is really smart with that. In some ways, this film takes a story and has a whole fresh take on it. Now, I don't think this was like the 90s version of the Ten Commandments that really introduced the story to a new generation. I actually think Rugrats sort of did that like a couple years before. And to be honest, I think in some ways there's some choices Rugrats makes that Prince of Egypt probably should have, because the Rugrats special actually like explains things a little better, and in this it's like very reliant on the fact that you probably have seen the Cecil B. DeMille film, heard it in Sunday school. They very much rely on the fact that you know this story, which is not really good storytelling. You're supposed to like have all that stuff in the movie, and I'm curious if like someone who was unaware of the Ten Commandments, which, you know, is not, I don't think most of the world, I don't know how much of the world really knows this story or the Cecil B. DeMille film or anything like that. From my perspective as a cis white dude in America and stuff, most people know it, but I'm sure there's somewhere in the world they don't. I'd actually be curious to hear someone who doesn't have it kind of told from birth to now, basically, hear their take on it, to be honest. But there's an important part, I think, towards the end where you see Ramesses come up and he's gonna take back the slaves he just let free. But there's not like an important story beat where Ramesses is like, wait, so I don't have slaves no more, I better like go and get them back because now I'm screwed. You know, the last moment we see with him is his son's dead and he's like, you and the slaves can go, and sort of feels like that's the end point. And like for him to have that shift, there needed to be a moment where he saw he had to do this, and it sort of I feel like that's a bad character beat, to be honest. And there's a couple times where that was the one that stuck out to me and was most memorable to me. It's like, you really should have had a scene, which I believe the Rugrats special does. And even the thing like towards the end, like I feel like the film really ends when we see Ramesses on the beach and Moses and the Hebrews walking off, and not with the Ten Commandments thing, which I felt like was a little tacked on. I don't like it when movies go like, but that is what happened in real life, so we got to include it. I like it when movies, you know, actually think about the story they're telling. For the most part, this film does do that actually very well, but there's oftentimes like, or specifically actually at the beginning as well, you see that they're killing all the firstborn sons of the Hebrews because they don't want a rebellion. They feel like this next generation, there will be a rebellion that's like obviously horrific, and Moses then, you know, is put in the basket and all, you know, then they find him and all those things. What we don't know actually in the movie is we just know they're killing all the firstborns. We don't know why, other than that they're just like dicks. They don't care. They just don't give you a reason. And then they have a mural of them killing a bunch of babies. Like, I don't know what that I mean, it plays a narrative role in the film, but like the logistics of like, hey, we killed a lot of babies and now I want a mural in my house of me ordering people to kill babies and feed them to crocodile, like that's like a thing you want to see every day. Like, I just, you know, narratively this is so rich and so deep, but you know, I get the metaphorical qualities, but like the logistics, I was like, I don't know, if I did something like that, I wouldn't want it there all the time. I would feel like horrible and want to myself jump into alligator. I also wouldn't do that, but that's a whole other thing. It's just, that's bizarre that they didn't set that up, and the obvious idea is like, oh, they did this because they were afraid that Moses would happen, and then Moses like still happened, which is sort of interesting actually when I was reading later about that. It does feel like there's often times where it expects you to have like read the book of Exodus or sort of know the Bible or something like that. For real though, I think one of the ways stories live on is you keep those traditions alive through new media, and you can do that through animation. If you look at particularly, and I've brought this up so many times, but Cartoon Saloon does that with Irish folklore and introduces it to a new generation, probably spreads it to more children across the world than would have if they didn't do that. But if you're going to leave out certain interesting aspects of it and just kind of like simplify it, now I understand there's only so much you can do, but that's actually a really rich thing. You just sort of like, whatever. I kind of wish that was in there because it just makes them look like crazy. And I mean, they're still, it's not that you're going to make them not crazy, but it's just like there was a rich element to there. And there are a couple times where I'd read like, what was that about? And then I read like, oh, there's like a reason for that. This is very much in that kind of Katzenberg way of like kind of leading with an extreme best foot forward. He was spending money like it was Quibi or something, and he had like an insane cast in this. He had Sandra Bullock, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jeff Goldblum, Martin Short, Steve Martin, Patrick Stewart, Helen Mirren, Danny Glover. Who was Danny Glover? Well, he was in this apparently. And then Val Kilmer and Ralph Fiennes as Moses and Ramesses. One of the things about their casting that I actually find incredibly interesting is that obviously they're both bigger names, newer, fresher names at the time, but they're not like movie star name. Val Kilmer was a movie star at the time, but they're not movie star names in terms of the casting that Katzenberg would be known for, actually. And like Val Kilmer does like a Mark Twain on stage, like he's very known for that kind of stuff. Ralph Fiennes is like a classically, or Ray Fiennes or whatever, is a classically kind of trained actor, and having those two go at each other is really interesting. Like they're actor kind of actors, and that normally doesn't work with an animated film, but it really worked. They give really strong performances, and you usually need a lot more inflection, a lot more like distinct voice. Like I almost forget it's Val Kilmer. It feels sort of anonymous, but in a way that really gives some heft to those characters, and almost like that they don't want to be in this argument, that they actually really love each other. They do, they're brothers. Like they don't want to be in this argument, but this has to happen. Like morally, this has to happen. And as much as the script and the screenplay and the way to take the story does that, their performances sell it. That you can tell there's hurt and there's pain in there, and that there's a love there, and that they don't want to do this to one another. Like they want to be brothers side by side and see everything in Egypt prosper and everyone be okay. And I find that really captivating, the way they play those two roles. They really played off of each other really excellently well. It's a very strong performance for animation, and it's not the kind of performances you see typically in animation, which I think is probably why this film sticks out for people in such a way. This was the feature debut of both Brenda Chapman and Stephen Hickner. Brenda Chapman would go on to direct Brave. Stephen Hickner would go on to direct B-Movie, and as well as Simon Wells, who directed The Time Machine and Philo Goes West and stuff. This is sort of the combination of ex-Disney animators as well as people from Spielberg's Amblimation studio, where Simon Wells was, obviously. And Simon Wells would direct Mars Needs Moms, but that's a whole other thing. It's sort of interesting seeing like all this crazy top talent, great artists. I think that's one of the things about this film. It's so unique. It's so different. I don't think it's a perfect film, and I think, a lot of people think it's like some sort of a masterpiece, and I've seen all these like high praise for it. I don't really agree with that, because I do think it doesn't hold up. It has a lot of holes in it that are filled in by you knowing this, and I can feel that every time I watch that. I felt this, but I like this more than the 10 Commandments. My favorite versions of the story are in animation, but the one I watch every year is the Rugrats one. It's not this one. And if I were to pick like a film version, a feature film version, I would pick this, because I do think it plays better. It's not as long. It gets into, I think, a moral question, like even if you love someone, should you do what's morally right? And yeah, the answer is yes, by the way. And I think Moses does the right thing. Like, he freed the slaves from Egypt. Even though he had a very prosperous life, even though he could have just, gone back and been absolved in all crimes and like had this very sheltered life, he did what needed to be done. And morally, that is excellent. But I think it's also the fact that you see him against someone that he loves. You understand the context. And I don't think any of them focus on that as well as this film really does. And I think that's what brings it out to people, because it made it personal. And that's probably why people have this connection to it. I, frankly, would like to watch a bunch of dumb babies do their version, but most people, I don't think, want to do that. I think with this film, that is why, because I think you can have an argument with a friend, but if you know morally what is the right thing to do, despite ruining that friendship, despite hurting other people, but that is the distinct right thing. And I don't think there's like a ton of reasons for doing that, but I think Moses was right. This thing sells it so well. It sells it to you on a personal level. And when you have that cut through all the pomp and circumstance that this kind of story is usually told with and really hit you, that's why these stories kind of live on, because it makes an impression on you. It teaches you a lesson and you think about it. And Prince of Egypt does that. And it probably does that better than any feature film version really has. And it's interesting because I don't think DreamWorks ever tried or pushed themselves this hard. And it is a damn shame when you look at the future we could have gotten. But it's kind of like one of those big cinematic what ifs. You had this all set up. You had this really amazing big gut punch of an opener, and you don't really do it again. They made films with duos like The Road to El Dorado, made a lot of fuck yous to Disney as well. But I think this showed a promise and a different kind of studio. And I think what sticks out is it made a connection. You saw something different. Part of me wishes there could have been a bit more, both from Dreamworks and both from the plot of this film explaining and having those arcs be explained rather than me thinking of maybe how did the Rugrats or Charlton Heston do that scene. And that's a little unfortunate, but I still think this is a very memorable, very wonderfully animated film. Kind of a one-of-a-kind feature that shows me the promise that Dreamworks had when they were starting out. So if you've seen The Prince of Egypt and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.